The hand was small enough to fit inside his palm. Marco Thorne didn't move. He stood in the center of the Seoul Clinic's marble corridor, tailored Brioni wool the color of charcoal, Italian leather shoes catching the clinical overhead glare, and stared down at the child who had just collided with his leg. She looked up at him with wide, uncertain eyes, maybe 5 years old. A pink cotton dress, hair pulled into 2 small pigtails tied with ribbon the color of cherry blossoms. "Sorry," she whispered in accented English, her voice barely louder than breath. He should have stepped aside, should have let her scurry back to whatever nervous mother had let her wander. But Marco Thorne didn't move, because his gaze had locked onto her wrist. The left one. The small hand she'd braced against his knee to steady herself. There, just beneath the pale inside of her forearm, rendered in ink so precise it could have been printed by a machine, was a red phoenix, not a child's temporary, tattoo. Not henna that would fade in a week. This was permanent, professional. The line work was flawless. Wings spread in full ascent, talons curled, the bird's head turned in profile as though it were watching something behind it. The shading had depth, gradient, the kind of work that took hours under a needle. And Marco Thorne knew that design, because he had drawn it himself. 6 years ago, in a hotel room in Busan on the skin of a woman who was supposed to be dead, 16 minutes earlier, Min Ah had chosen this clinic specifically because it didn't ask questions. The building was located in Gangnam, nestled between a luxury skincare boutique and a private banking center. The entrance was understated. Frosted glass, a brass placard engraved with the words Elysian Health and Wellness in both Hangul and English. No signs, no advertisements. If you knew about it, you could afford it. She had called ahead, paid in cash, transferred under a name that wasn't hers. The appointment was for a routine pediatric checkup. Nothing invasive, nothing that would flag a database. Hana had been nervous. "Will it hurt?" she'd asked in the back of the taxi, her small fingers tangled in the hem of her dress. "No, sweetheart," Mina had murmured, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her daughter's ear. "It's just to make sure you're healthy. The doctor is very kind." She didn't tell Hana the truth, that this checkup was a test, that if anything in her blood work came back abnormal, they would disappear again. New city, new name, new school. Min-ah had been running for 5 years. She was very, very good at it. The clinic's interior was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist, flooded with natural light from floor to ceiling windows that overlooked a manicured rooftop garden. The walls were warm white. The floors were pale wood. Everything smelled faintly of eucalyptus and medical-grade disinfectant. A receptionist in a cream blazer greeted them with a professional smile. No judgment, no curiosity, just efficiency. "Mrs. Kang?" she asked, using the alias Min-ah had provided. "Yes." "Room 3. Dr. Yoon will be with you shortly." Min-ah nodded, taking Hana's hand and guiding her down the hallway. She should have felt safe. This was supposed to be routine, but the moment she stepped into the corridor, her instincts prickled. There was a man standing near the glass elevator at the end of the hall. Tall, late 30s, maybe 40. Black suit, no tie. His posture was too still, too controlled, like a blade resting in a sheath. His hair was dark, swept back from a sharp, angular face. The kind of face that didn't smile unless it was calculated. He wasn't looking at her. Not yet. But Mina's pulse spiked anyway, because she knew that silhouette, knew the set of those shoulders, knew the way his weight balanced on the balls of his feet, ready to move in any direction without hesitation. No, it can't be. She tightened her grip on Hana's hand and turned toward the examination room, heart hammering behind her ribs. "Mama?" Hana's voice was quiet, confused. "You're hurting me." Minna loosened her fingers immediately, forcing her breathing to steady. "Sorry, baby. Let's just..." But Hana had already slipped free. Children were curious, fearless in the way only the innocent could be. She'd spotted something through the glass wall of the waiting area. A small koi pond built into the center of the room, water trickling over smooth stones. "Hana, wait!" But her daughter was already moving, small shoes tapping across the polished floor, drawn toward the glittering water like a moth to flame. And she ran directly into him. Marco looked down. The child stumbled back a step, her small hand pressed against his leg to catch her balance. "Sorry," she whispered. He should have ignored her, should have stepped aside and continued toward the private consultation room his security team had arranged on the 5th floor. He was here for a different reason entirely, a discreet medical assessment, the kind that didn't appear on any official record. But Marco Thorne had survived 15 years in the underworld, not by ignoring details. And this was not a detail. This was a detonation. The Red Phoenix, his design. On a child who couldn't be older than 5? His mind moved like a switchblade, fast, cold, precise. He knew exactly 3 people who had ever worn that mark. 2 of them were dead. One of them had been a woman named Mina Seo, a translator he'd used during a negotiation in Busan. She'd been clever, careful, beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention, but earned it anyway. He'd kept her close for 3 months, long enough to teach her things she shouldn't have known, long enough to mark her. And then she had vanished the same night his convoy was ambushed on the road between Seoul and Incheon. 4 of his men dead, his brother Luca in the hospital with a punctured lung. Marco himself had barely made it out. The intelligence report afterward had been clear. Min Ah Seo had been killed in the crossfire. Her body was never recovered, but the carnage at the scene left no room for doubt. Marco had attended a private memorial, burned her photograph, moved on. But corpses didn't have children. And this child, this small, fragile girl looking up at him with dark, almond-shaped eyes, was wearing his mark. Marco's gaze lifted. Slowly, across the corridor, and locked onto the woman standing frozen in the doorway of examination room 3. Minna's breath stopped. She watched as Marco Thorne's eyes moved from her daughter's wrist to her face, and the air between them turned to ice. He didn't blink, didn't move, but something in his expression shifted. A minute, tightening at the corners of his mouth, a flicker in his gaze that could have been shock or rage or something far more dangerous. He knows. Minna's legs locked. Her mind screamed at her to move, to grab Hana and run, but her body refused to obey. Because Marco Thorne wasn't just looking at her, he was dissecting her. She saw his gaze track over her face, the shorter hair, the colored contacts she wore now, the subtle weight she'd lost from years of running. But beneath all of it, she knew he could still see her, the woman he'd marked, the woman he'd buried. Marco's hand moved, not fast, not threatening, just a slow, deliberate reach downward. He wrapped his fingers around Hana's wrist, the one with the tattoo, and held it up into the light. "Where?" he said quietly, his voice low and textured like gravel under silk. "Did you get this?" Hana blinked up at him, confused. "Get what?" "The mark on your wrist." She glanced down at the phoenix, then back up at him with the unfiltered honesty only children possessed. "I was born with it. Mama says it's special." Marco's jaw tightened. His gaze lifted again, locking onto Mina across the corridor. And, for the first time in 5 years, Mina saw the face of the man the underworld called the Vulture. Cold, calculating, unforgiving. He released Hana's wrist gently, almost carefully, and straightened to his full height. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a phone. One tap. The clinic's lights dimmed for half a second. A flicker most people would have dismissed as a power fluctuation. But Mina knew better. Because the soft click that echoed through the hallway wasn't electrical, it was mechanical, The biometric locks on every exit had just engaged. Marco slipped the phone back into his pocket and began walking toward her. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable. Hana looked between them, her small face creasing with confusion. "Mama?" Mina couldn't answer. Her throat had closed. Marco stopped 3 feet away. Up close, he looked exactly as she remembered. Sharp cheekbones, a scar barely visible along his left temple, eyes the color of cold steel. He smelled faintly of cedar and gunpowder residue. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it filled the entire corridor. "You didn't just steal my heart, Mina." He leaned in, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body, close enough that no one else in the clinic could hear. "You stole my bloodline." Mina didn't remember getting into the car. One moment she was standing in the clinic corridor, Hana's hand gripping her fingers with the confused strength of a frightened child. The next, she was sliding across cream leather seats that smelled of bergamot and money. Her daughter pressed against her side, the Seoul skyline blurring past tinted windows. The vehicle was a Maybach, black, armored, based on the thickness of the glass and the way the doors had sealed with a pressurized hiss. 2 men sat in the front, broad shoulders, earpieces, the kind of stillness that came from years of professional violence. Marco sat across from her. He hadn't spoken since the clinic, hadn't touched her, hadn't even looked at Hana again. He simply sat with one ankle crossed over his knee, his phone in his hand, scrolling through something with the detached focus of a man reviewing stock prices rather than orchestrating a kidnapping. Because that's what this was. Mina had no illusions. She had been collected, packaged, transported, and now she was being delivered somewhere she would not be able to leave. "Where are you taking us?" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Marco didn't look up. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption." "And if I don't want to talk?" Now he looked up. His eyes met hers across the cabin, and Mina felt the temperature drop by 10 degrees. There was no anger in his expression, no heat, just the cold, patient assessment of a predator deciding whether its prey was worth the effort of a chase. "You'll talk," he said quietly, "because the alternative is a conversation with people far less patient than me." Hana shifted against Mina's side, her small body trembling. "Mama, I don't like this car. I want to go home." Mina wrapped her arm around her daughter and pulled her close, pressing her lips to the top of Hana's head. "It's okay, baby. We're just going on a little trip." "I don't want a trip. I want my room. I want Bomi." Bomi. The stuffed rabbit Hana had left at the clinic, the one she'd slept with every night since she was 2. Mina's chest tightened. Marco's gaze flickered to the child for a moment, just a moment, before returning to his phone. His thumb moved across the screen. "Have someone retrieve a stuffed rabbit from examination room 3 at Elysian," he said, his voice flat. "Pink, well worn. Deliver it within the hour." The driver responded with a single word. "Understood." Hana blinked, her tears pausing midstream. She looked at Marco with the unguarded curiosity of a child who didn't yet understand that monsters could wear expensive suits. "You're getting Bomi?" Marco didn't answer. He slipped his phone back into his jacket and turned his attention to the window. But Mina had seen it. The flicker, the almost imperceptible softening at the corner of his jaw when he'd heard Hana's distress. She filed it away. A weapon for later, perhaps, or a vulnerability she could exploit. Because Mina had survived 5 years by understanding the men who hunted her. And Marco Thorne, for all his cold precision, was still a man. The estate revealed itself in pieces. First, the road changed, smooth asphalt, giving way to private pavement, the kind maintained by staff who existed solely to ensure that every stone was in place. Then, the walls appeared, 12 feet high, pale gray concrete topped with sensors that glinted in the afternoon light. Gates opened without the car slowing. Security personnel in dark suits stood at intervals, their postures relaxed, but their eyes tracking every movement. And then the house. No, not a house. A compound. The main structure was 3 stories of glass and white stone, perched on a hillside overlooking the Han River. The architecture was brutalist in the way only extreme wealth could afford. Clean lines, sharp angles, vast windows that reflected the sky like mirrors. The grounds were immaculate, sculpted, gardens. A stone pathway leading to what looked like a private helipad. This was not a home. This was a fortress disguised as one. The car stopped at the main entrance. The door opened from outside. Another security officer, his face blank and professional. Marco stepped out first, buttoning his jacket with a single practiced motion. He didn't offer Minna his hand, didn't wait for her. He simply walked toward the entrance, expecting her to follow. She did, because there was nowhere else to go. The interior was worse than the exterior, not because it was ugly. It was beautiful, vaulted ceilings, marble floors, art that Minna recognized from museum catalogs. A Basquiat hung in the foyer. A sculpture that might have been a Giacometti stood near the staircase. But beauty could be a cage, and this place felt like a very elegant prison. "Take the child to the East Wing," Marco said to a woman who appeared from a side corridor, middle-aged, gray hair pulled into a severe bun, dressed in the crisp black and white uniform of household staff. "She can have the blue room. Ensure she has food, entertainment, and the rabbit when it arrives." Minna's grip on Hana tightened. "She stays with me." Marco turned. For the first time since the clinic, he gave her his full attention. Not a glance. Not a passing assessment. He looked at her the way a surgeon looks at a patient before making the first incision. "She will be comfortable," he said. "She will be safe. And she will be in the next room, close enough that you can see her through the glass if it makes you feel better." He stepped closer. Close enough that Minna had to tilt her head to maintain eye contact. "But you and I are going to have a conversation, Minna, and it is not one your daughter needs to hear." Minna's heart was pounding. Every instinct screamed at her to grab Hana and run. But she knew with the certainty of someone who had spent 5 years studying escape routes, that there was no running from this place, not yet. She knelt in front of Hana, cupping her daughter's face in her hands. "Baby, I need you to go with this nice lady for a little while. Mama has to talk to someone, and then I'll come find you. Okay?" Hana's lower lip trembled. "Promise?" "I promise." She pressed a kiss to Hana's forehead, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, baby shampoo and something sweeter, something that smelled like innocence. Then she let go. The gray-haired woman took Hana's hand with surprising gentleness, leading her down a corridor paneled in pale oak. Hana looked back once, her eyes wide and frightened. Minna forced herself to smile, and then her daughter disappeared around a corner, and she was alone with the Vulture. The room Marco led her to was a study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined one wall. A massive desk dominated the center. Dark walnut, bare except for a single laptop, and a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid. The windows behind it offered a panoramic view of the river, the water catching the late afternoon light like scattered diamonds. Marco didn't sit behind the desk. He walked to the window instead, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then his voice came, low and controlled. 5 years. Minna stayed near the door. Her legs wanted to fold. Her body wanted to collapse. But she forced herself to remain standing, her spine straight, her chin raised. 5 years, 2 months, and 11 days, she said. But who's counting? He turned. The light from the window silhouetted him, casting his face in shadow. But she could still see his eyes, still see the cold fire burning behind them. You let me believe you were dead. I had to. You had to. He repeated the words like they were poisons on his tongue. You had to stage your own death, had to vanish without a trace, had to... He stopped. His jaw worked. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more dangerous. Had to keep my daughter from me for 5 years. There it was. The word neither of them had spoken aloud. Daughter. Minna felt it land in her chest like a blade. She's not... Don't. Marco's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Don't insult me, Minna. I can count. I can see. She has my mother's eyes, my grandmother's mouth. He stepped toward her, each footfall deliberate. And she has my mark on her wrist. The one I designed. The one I gave to exactly 3 people in my entire life. He stopped a foot away from her. She is mine. And you stole her from me. Minna's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide the tremor. I saved her from you. From me? From your world. From the bullets and the blood and the bodies that follow you everywhere you go. Her voice rose despite herself. I was there that night, Marco. The night of the ambush. I saw what your life costs. I felt it. You saw an attack. I saw your brother put a gun to my head. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marco went still. Completely, utterly still. The kind of stillness that preceded violence. What did you say? Minna's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. But she'd kept this secret for 5 years. Had swallowed it, buried it, let it poison her from the inside. And now it was coming out whether she wanted it to or not. Luca, she said, your brother, your trusted second in command, the man who sat at your right hand and smiled at you across dinner tables. She let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. He's the one who arranged the ambush. And when I survived the initial attack, he found me hiding in the wreckage. She could still see it. The smoke, the flames. Luca's face illuminated by firelight, his expression utterly calm as he pressed the barrel of a pistol against her temple. He told me that I was a complication, that Marco Thorne didn't need a weakness, that if I ever surfaced again, he would make sure I died slowly, and anyone I loved would die with me. Marco's face had turned to stone. His eyes were fixed on her, unblinking, unreadable. He let me go because killing me himself would have left evidence. So he gave me a choice. Disappear forever, or watch everyone I cared about die. Minna's voice cracked. I didn't know I was pregnant yet. I didn't know until 3 weeks later, when I was hiding in a boarding house in Jeju with a fake passport and a burner phone. She lifted her chin, meeting Marco's gaze with everything she had. So, yes. I kept her from you, because the alternative was watching your brother murder her in her crib. Silence. The kind of silence that filled rooms before explosions. Marco didn't move, didn't blink. His chest rose and fell with slow, measured breaths, but Minna could see the tension coiling through his body, like a spring about to snap. When he spoke, his voice was barely human. Luca. One word. His brother's name. But it wasn't a question. It was a death sentence. Minna watched something shift behind Marco's eyes. A door closing, a lock clicking into place. The man standing before her was no longer the cold, controlled executive who had escorted her from the clinic. This was the Vulture, and he had just discovered that the enemy wasn't outside his walls. It was sharing his blood. Marco turned away from her, walked to the desk, placed both hands flat on its surface, his head bowed, his shoulders tight. Where is he now? Minna asked quietly. Luca. Marco's laugh was soft and utterly devoid of humor. Downstairs, in the security center, reviewing footage from your clinic extraction. He lifted his head, staring out at the river. He's been looking for you for 5 years, Minna. Told me it was to find my killer. told me he'd never stop hunting the people who took you from me." He turned to face her, and for the first time, Mina saw something crack in his expression, something that might have been grief or rage or the terrible fusion of both. "He's been hunting you to finish what he started, and I've been helping him do it." The weight of that confession settled between them like ash. Mina watched Marco's hands curl into fists against the desk, watched the tendons stand out beneath his skin, watched the controlled stillness give way to something far more volatile. "Every lead I gave him," Marco said, his voice low and rough. "Every resource, every contact." He laughed again, that same hollow, terrible sound. "I handed him the weapons to hunt you, to hunt my own child." Mina didn't move, didn't speak. There was nothing she could say that would soften this, nothing that would make it easier. Marco Thorne had just discovered that his entire world was built on a brother's betrayal, and she had been running from the wrong monster for 5 years. "What happens now?" she asked. Marco was silent for a long moment. Then he straightened, rolled his shoulders. When he turned to face her, the crack in his expression had sealed itself. The Vulture was back, cold, calculating, utterly in control. "Now," he said, "we make sure he doesn't know that I know." Mina frowned. "You're not going to confront him?" "Confront him?" Marco's smile was thin and sharp as a razor blade. "Mina, my brother has spent 5 years building alliances within the organization, positioning himself, waiting for the right moment to take everything I've built." He shook his head slowly. "If I move against him now without proof, without preparation, I won't just lose. I'll be dead within the week. And so will you. And so will that little girl in the East Wing." The mention of Hana sent a spike of ice through Mina's chest. "Then, what do we do?" Marco walked to the crystal decanter on his desk, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass. Didn't drink it. Just stared at the amber liquid like it held answers. "We give him exactly what he doesn't expect," Marco said. "We make him comfortable, overconfident. We let him believe he's winning." He set the glass down and turned to face her. "There's a gala tomorrow night, the Seoul International Finance Summit. Every major player in the Asian underworld will be there, hiding behind charitable donations and champagne toasts." His eyes locked onto hers. "You're going to attend, as my fiancé." Mina's blood went cold. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. I'm not going to pretend to be. You're going to do exactly what I tell you to do." Marco's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The authority in it was absolute. "Because right now, the only thing keeping you and Hana alive is the fact that Luca doesn't know you're here. The moment he finds out, and he will find out, he's going to move. Fast, violently. And he won't make the same mistake twice." He stepped toward her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his steel-colored eyes. "But if I announce you as my fiancé, publicly in front of every power broker in Seoul, you become untouchable, protected. Killing you would mean killing a member of my inner circle. And even Luca isn't stupid enough to make that move without absolute certainty he can get away with it." Mina's mind raced. She hated that his logic made sense, hated that she could see the shape of his strategy, the cold elegance of it. "And what happens when he realizes you know?" "He won't. Not until I want him to." Marco's smile returned, that thin, dangerous curve. "I've been playing this game for 15 years, Mina. My brother thinks he's the smartest person in the room. I'm going to let him keep thinking that right up until the moment I take everything from him." He reached out. For a moment, Mina thought he was going to touch her face. Her body tensed, caught between the instinct to flinch and something deeper, something she'd buried a long time ago. But his fingers stopped an inch from her cheek. "Tomorrow night," he said softly, "you're going to smile. You're going to hold my arm. You're going to look at me like you never stopped loving me. His hand dropped. And you're going to trust me to keep you alive. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Mina was given a room adjacent to Hana's, a suite larger than the apartment they'd shared in Busan, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the gardens. The bed was vast. The sheets were silk. The closet was already stocked with clothes in her exact size. She didn't ask how Marco knew her measurements. She suspected she wouldn't like the answer. Hana adapted faster than Mina expected. Children were resilient that way. Their worlds could shatter and reform in the space of a single afternoon. By evening, she was exploring her new room with cautious curiosity, her stuffed rabbit Bomi clutched against her chest. The rabbit had arrived exactly 53 minutes after Marco's order. Mina tried to sleep, failed, spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome of what was about to happen. In the morning, preparations began. A team arrived at 10. Stylists, makeup artists, a tailor with measuring tape draped around his neck, and the focused intensity of a surgeon. Mina sat through it all, passive as a mannequin, letting them transform her into someone she barely recognized. By 6 in the evening, she was standing in front of a floor-length mirror, staring at a stranger. The dress was burgundy silk, custom-fitted. It clung to her body in ways that felt deliberate, emphasizing curves she'd forgotten she had, exposing just enough skin to suggest without revealing. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist, a few strands left loose to frame her face. The makeup was subtle but precise. Smoky eyes, lips stained the color of crushed berries. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. She looked like someone who belonged on Marco Thorne's arm. Mama? Mina turned. Hana was standing in the doorway, her eyes wide. You look like a princess, Hana whispered. Mina's chest tightened. She crouched down, ignoring the way the dress protested the movement, and took Hana's hands. I have to go somewhere tonight, baby, just for a few hours. Mrs. Park is going to stay with you, and I'll be back before you wake up. Hana's lower lip trembled. Do you have to? I do. Mina pressed her forehead against her daughter's. But I promise, nothing is going to happen to us, okay? Hana nodded slowly, unconvinced, but trusting. It was that trust that made Mina's heart break. I love you, she whispered. Love you too, Mama. Mina kissed her daughter's cheek, breathed in the scent of her hair one more time, and stood. Marco was waiting in the foyer. He was dressed in a black tuxedo that had clearly been tailored to his exact specifications. The fabric moved with him like a second skin, emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders and the lean power of his frame. His hair was swept back, his jaw was freshly shaved. A watch glinted at his wrist, vintage, understated, probably worth more than most apartments. He looked up as she descended the staircase, and for a single unguarded moment, something shifted in his expression. It wasn't softness. Marco Thorne didn't do soft, but there was a flicker of something. Recognition, perhaps. Memory. The ghost of whoever they had been to each other 6 years ago, before bullets and betrayal had torn them apart. Then it was gone. His face settled back into its usual mask of cold control. You'll do, he said. Mina reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped in front of him. Charming as ever. Charm is a liability. Precision is an asset. He extended his arm. Shall we? She hesitated, took it. His arm was solid beneath her fingers, warm through the fabric of his jacket. She could feel the coiled tension in his muscles, the readiness that never seemed to leave him. They walked out together, into the waiting night. The gala was held at the Grand Hyatt Seoul. The hotel had been transformed for the evening, cascading chandeliers, walls of white orchids, a string quartet playing something elegant and forgettable in the corner. Champagne flowed. Diamonds glittered. The air smelled of expensive perfume and barely concealed ambition. Minna had been to events like this before. During her time with Marco, she'd attended a dozen galas, charity auctions, private dinners where deals worth millions were sealed with a handshake and a smile. But she'd never been the center of attention. Tonight she was. The moment they stepped through the entrance, every head in the room turned. Conversations paused. Eyes tracked them as they moved through the crowd. Marco's hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Minna's chin raised, her expression carefully neutral. She could feel the weight of scrutiny pressing against her skin. "They're staring," she murmured through a fixed smile. "Of course they are." Marco's voice was low, intended only for her. A man's dead lover returning from the grave tends to attract attention. "You told them I was dead?" "I believed you were dead." The story spread on its own. His hand pressed slightly harder against her back. "Smile. You're in love, remember?" Minna's jaw tightened, but she smiled. They made their way through the crowd, stopping every few feet to accept congratulations from men in tailored suits and women draped in silk. Marco introduced her the same way each time. "My fiancé." The word felt like a brand. And then she saw him. Luca Thorne was standing near the bar, a champagne flute in his hand, deep in conversation with a silver-haired man Minna didn't recognize. He was shorter than Marco, leaner, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the calculating coldness behind his eyes. He looked up as they approached and smiled. "Brother." He stepped forward, arms spreading in welcome. "And who is this vision you've brought with you?" Marco's expression didn't change. Not a flicker, not a twitch. "Luca, I believe you remember Minna." Luca's smile widened. His eyes swept over her, slow, deliberate, lingering in places that made her skin crawl. "Minna Seoul, risen from the dead." He took her hand before she could stop him, pressing his lips to her knuckles. "I must say, the afterlife has been kind to you." Minna forced herself not to pull away, forced herself to meet his gaze with a smile that felt like broken glass in her mouth. "Luca, it's been a long time." 5 years. His eyes glittered. "We looked everywhere for you, you know." Marco was devastated, absolutely destroyed. He glanced at his brother. "And now here you are. Returned to us. Like a miracle. Like a phoenix." Marco said quietly. Something flickered in Luca's expression, so fast Minna almost missed it. But she didn't miss it. "He knows," she thought. "He knows I'm alive. He's known all along. And he's playing the same game Marco is." The rest of the evening was a performance. Marco kept her close, his hand on her back, her waist, her arm. Every touch was precise, calculated, designed to send a message to everyone watching. She belongs to me. Minna played her role, smiled when expected, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Let her fingers linger on Marco's arm in ways that suggested intimacy. But beneath the surface, her mind was racing. Luca was watching them. She could feel his gaze even when she couldn't see him. A constant pressure, like a finger pressed against her spine. He was waiting for something, and Min-ah didn't know what. Near midnight, Marco led her onto the dance floor. The orchestra had shifted to something slower. A waltz, perhaps, or something close to it. He took her hand, placed his other hand on her waist, drew her close enough that she could feel the heat of his body through the thin silk of her dress. "Relax," he murmured against her ear. "You're too stiff. You look like you're being held hostage." "I am being held hostage. You're being protected. There's a difference." "Is there?" His hand tightened on her waist, not painfully, but enough to remind her who was leading. "Yes," he said quietly. "There is." They moved together in silence for a moment, Despite everything, Minna found herself remembering the first time they'd danced in a hotel ballroom in Busan. How he'd held her then, how she'd let herself believe, just for a moment, that he could be something other than what he was. "He's watching us," she whispered. "I know. What do we do?" "Nothing. We let him watch. We let him wonder." Marco's lips brushed her ear, and Minna's breath caught despite herself. "And we give him exactly what he expects to see. A brother too distracted by a returned lover to notice the knife aimed at his back." The song ended. Another began. And then a hand touched Minna's shoulder. "May I cut in?" Luca's voice was smooth, pleasant. The voice of a man who had never done anything wrong in his life. Marco's grip on Minna's waist tightened for just a moment, then released. "Of course," he said. "Family should welcome family." He stepped back, disappeared into the crowd, and Minna was alone with the man who had held a gun to her head 5 years ago. Luca took her hand, placed his other hand on her waist. His touch was lighter than Marco's, almost delicate. But there was something wrong about it, something that made her skin want to crawl off her bones. They began to move. "You've aged well," Luca said conversationally. "Motherhood suits you." Minna's heart stopped. She kept moving, kept smiling, but her blood had turned to ice. "Motherhood? Oh, come now." Luca's smile widened. "Did you really think I didn't know about the child? That pretty little girl with the phoenix on her wrist?" Minna's feet faltered, just for a moment, but Luca caught her, steadied her, kept them moving as though nothing had happened. "I've known about her for 2 years, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Watched her from a distance. Waited for the right moment to bring you both back into the fold." His hand tightened on her waist. "And now here you are, right where I need you." Minna's voice came out as a rasp. "What do you want?" Luca leaned in. His lips brushed her ear. His breath was warm and carried the faint sweetness of champagne. "I want what I've always wanted," he whispered. "Everything my brother has. His empire, his legacy, his blood." He pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes with a smile that didn't reach his. "I know your secret, Minna, and Marco won't be able to save you a second time." The music swelled. Luca released her with a graceful bow, and Minna stood frozen in the center of the dance floor, the taste of terror sharp and metallic on her tongue. The ride back to the estate was silent. Min-ah sat rigid in the back of the Maybach, her hands clasped in her lap, her fingers bone-white against the burgundy silk of her dress. The city lights streaked past the tinted windows like falling stars, but she didn't see them. All she could see was Luca's smile. All she could hear were his words. "I know your secret. And Marco won't be able to save you a second time." Marco sat across from her, his posture relaxed, one ankle crossed over his knee. To anyone watching, he looked calm, unbothered. A man returning home after a pleasant evening. But Minna had learned to read him, and she could see the tension coiled beneath the surface, the slight tightness at the corners of his jaw, the way his fingers drummed a slow, deliberate rhythm against his thigh. He knew something had happened during that dance. He was waiting for her to tell him. "He knows about Hana." The words fell out of her before she could stop them. Flat, hollow, the sound of surrender. Marco's fingers stopped drumming. "What exactly did he say?" Minna recounted the conversation. Every word, every pause, the way Luca's hand had tightened on her waist, the warmth of his breath against her ear. When she finished, Marco didn't respond immediately. He turned to look out the window, his profile sharp against the passing lights. 2 years, he said finally. "He's known for 2 years." That's what he said. Which means he's been waiting, planning, positioning pieces on a board I didn't even know existed. Marco's voice was quiet. Too quiet. the calm before a hurricane. He let me bring you back. Let me announce the engagement. He wanted this. Wanted what? Marco turned to face her. In the dim light of the cabin, his eyes looked almost black. A target he could aim at without suspicion, a weakness he could exploit, a way to destroy me without ever raising a weapon. Minna's stomach turned to ice. Hana, you, both of you, both. Marco's jaw tightened. He's going to use you to break me, and then he's going to take everything I've built. So, what do we do? For a long moment, Marco didn't answer. His gaze drifted back to the window, to the city sliding past like a fever dream. We move first, he said. Before he expects it. Before he's ready. Move where? There's a shipment arriving at the Seoul docks tomorrow night. Legitimate cargo on the surface, but the manifest includes certain items that Luca has been using to fund his operation without my knowledge. Marco's expression hardened. I'm going to intercept it, cut off his resources, force him to act before he's ready. And us? Hana and me? You're coming with me. Minna's blood ran cold. To the docks. To the safest place you can possibly be. Marco cut her off, his voice sharp. Which is wherever I am. Luca has people inside this estate. I don't know how many, I don't know who. But I know that the moment I leave you here, alone, you become vulnerable. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. I am not letting you out of my sight. Either of you. Not until this is over. The docks were different at night. Minna remembered them from her previous life. The life before Marco, when she'd worked as a translator for shipping companies and spent long hours in portside offices, processing manifests and certificates of origin. During the day, the Seoul docks were industrial, functional, alive with the clatter of cranes and the shouts of workers. At night, they were something else entirely. The container yards stretched into the darkness like a maze of metal canyons. Sodium lights cast pools of orange across the concrete, leaving vast stretches of shadow between them. The air smelled of salt and diesel, and something older, the deep, briny decay of the sea. The Maybach pulled to a stop near a warehouse at the eastern edge of the port. 2 black SUVs flanked it, carrying Marco's security team. 8 men in tactical gear, their faces obscured by the darkness. Minna held Hana against her chest. The little girl was half asleep, her head resting on Minna's shoulder. Bomi the rabbit clutched in her arms. She'd been confused when they'd woken her, frightened. But Minna had whispered reassurances until her breathing slowed, her small body relaxing into the exhausted trust of childhood. Now, they were here. In the belly of the beast, Marco stepped out of the car first, scanning the perimeter with the practiced efficiency of a man who had spent his life expecting ambush. When he was satisfied, he opened Minna's door and extended his hand. She took it. Let him help her out. Felt the warmth of his palm against hers and hated herself for the comfort it brought. Stay close to me, he said quietly. No matter what happens. What's going to happen? His eyes met hers. In the orange glow of the sodium lights, they looked almost human. Hopefully nothing, but hope is not a strategy. He turned and walked toward the warehouse. Minna followed, Hana's weight warm against her shoulder. The warehouse was cavernous and cold. Stacked containers rose on either side like walls of rusted metal, their surfaces scarred by salt and time. The floor was concrete, cracked and stained with decades of industrial use. Somewhere in the darkness, water dripped with a steady rhythmic pulse. Marco's men spread out, taking positions at strategic points around the space. Their movements were silent and precise, the choreography of professionals who had done this 100 times before. Marco led Minna to a small office at the back of the warehouse, a prefab structure with reinforced walls and a single window that overlooked the main floor. Inside, there was a desk, 2 chairs, and a bank of monitors showing security feeds from around the port. "Wait here," he said. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." Minna's grip on Hana tightened. "Where are you going?" "To end this." He paused at the door, looked back at her, at Hana. His expression shifted, something fleeting and unreadable passing through his eyes. "I'll be back," he said. "I promise." And then he was gone. Minna locked the door, sat down in one of the chairs, held her daughter, and watched the monitors, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. On the screens, she could see Marco's men taking their positions, could see the vast emptiness of the container yard, the shadows pooling between the stacks like dark water, could see Marco himself, walking toward a group of figures emerging from between two containers. And then everything went wrong. The first shot came from nowhere. Minna didn't hear the gunfire, not at first. She just saw the flash on the monitor, a spark of light in the darkness, and then one of Marco's men crumpled to the ground. Then another, and then the sound reached her, a staccato burst of automatic fire, muffled by the warehouse walls, but unmistakable, the rhythm of violence, the percussion of death. Hana woke with a cry, her small body jerking in Minna's arms. "Mama? Mama, what's happening?" "Shh, baby, it's okay. It's going to be okay." But it wasn't okay. Minna could see that on the monitors. Marco's men were falling back, taking cover behind containers as muzzle flashes lit up the darkness from multiple directions. They were surrounded, and Marco was in the center of it all. She watched him move, watched the Vulture come alive. It was like watching a different person. The cold, controlled man she knew disappeared, replaced by something primal and terrifying. He moved through the chaos with a fluidity that shouldn't have been possible, his body a weapon in constant motion. A figure emerged from behind a container. Marco's arm came up. A single shot. The figure dropped. Another came from the left. Marco pivoted, closed. The distance in 2 strides, and the attacker went down with a sound Minna couldn't hear but could imagine. The wet crack of a broken neck. He was beautiful and terrible. A monster in tailored wool. A predator who had finally stopped pretending to be anything else. But there were too many of them. Minna saw the moment the tide turned. Saw Marco take cover behind a forklift. Saw the blood darkening the sleeve of his jacket. Saw the shooters closing in from 3 sides, tightening the noose. And she saw the warehouse door open. 3 men, tactical gear, automatic weapons, moving toward the office where she sat with her daughter. Minna's blood turned to ice. She looked around desperately. The office had no other exit. The window was too small to climb through. She was trapped. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Hana was crying now, her face buried against Minna's neck, her small body trembling. "Mama, I'm scared. Mama, I want to go home." "I know, baby, I know." Minna's voice cracked. She pressed her lips to Hana's hair, breathing in the scent of her daughter one more time. "Close your eyes, okay? Keep them closed no matter what." The door handle rattled. Minna looked around for a weapon. Anything. Her hand closed around a letter opener on the desk. Pathetic. Useless. But she gripped it anyway, placing herself between the door and her daughter. The lock gave way. The door swung open, and Marco Thorne stepped through. He was covered in blood. Most of it wasn't his, but enough of it was. A gash on his forehead, another on his arm, his white shirt torn and crimson beneath his jacket. His breathing was ragged. His eyes were wild. But he was alive. Behind him, Minna could see the 3 men who had been approaching the office. They were on the ground. They weren't moving. Marco's gaze swept the room. Found Minna, found Hana, found the letter opener clutched in Minna's white-knuckled grip. Something in his expression cracked. "It's over," he said, his voice hoarse. "They're gone. All of them." Minna's legs gave out. She sank into the chair, Hana still clutched against her chest, the letter opener clattering to the floor. "How many?" she whispered. 15. Maybe more. Marco leaned against the doorframe, his chest heaving. Luca's men. All of them. He wasn't trying to warn us. He was trying to eliminate us. But you. I handled it. Those 3 words. So simple. So inadequate for what she had just witnessed. Marco pushed himself off the doorframe and crossed the room. He stopped in front of her, looking down at Hana's tear-streaked face with an expression Minna couldn't read. Is she hurt? No, just scared. Marco nodded slowly. He started to turn away, and then Hana spoke. Appa? The word hung in the air like a prayer. Marco froze. Minna's heart stopped. Hana lifted her head from Minna's shoulder, her dark eyes, Marco's mother's eyes, fixed on the bloodied man standing before her. Appa, she said again, her voice small and trembling. You came back. Marco didn't move, didn't breathe. He stood there like a statue, his bloodied hands hanging at his sides, his face a mask of something Mine-Ah had never seen on him before. Vulnerability. And then something broke. The Vulture, the cold, calculating predator who had carved through 15 men without hesitation, knelt down in front of a 5-year-old girl, and his expression shattered. Yes, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I came back. Hana reached out. Her small hand, the one with the red phoenix on her wrist, touched Marco's cheek. Her fingers came away red with blood, but she didn't flinch, didn't pull away. You're hurt, she said. It's nothing. Mama can fix it. Mama fixes everything. Marco's jaw tightened. His eyes glistened in the dim light. Not tears, Minna told herself. The Vulture didn't cry, but something was leaking out of him nonetheless. Something he had kept locked away for a very long time. I'm sorry, he said. The words seemed to cost him everything. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you had to run. I'm sorry. His voice broke. Hana leaned forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. And Marco Thorne, the man the underworld called the Vulture, the man who had just killed 15 people with his bare hands, buried his face in his daughter's shoulder and held her like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. They stayed like that for a long moment, father and daughter, monster and miracle. Minna watched, her heart aching with something she couldn't name. And then Marco pulled back, gently, carefully. He looked at Hana with eyes that had been washed clean of everything but love. I need you to do something for me, he said quietly. Can you be brave for a little bit longer? Hana nodded solemnly. Good girl. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I need to check something, and then we're going to go somewhere, safe, somewhere no one can hurt you ever again. He stood, looked at Minna. The vulnerability was already sealing itself away, the Vulture returning to his perch. But something was different now. Something had shifted. Give me the rabbit, he said. Minna frowned. What? The stuffed rabbit. Bomi. His jaw tightened. Give it to me. Hana's arms instinctively tightened around the toy. No, Bomi's mine. I know, sweetheart. I just need to look at it for a moment. Marco's voice softened, a tone Minna had never heard from him before. I'll give it right back, I promise. Hana looked at her mother. Minna nodded slowly. The little girl held out the rabbit. Marco took it carefully, turning it over in his bloodied hands. He examined it with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. The seams, the stitching, the worn patches where Hana's fingers had rubbed the fabric thin. And then he stopped. His fingers found something at the base of the rabbit's spine, a small hard lump beneath the stuffing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folding knife, flicked it open, made a careful incision in the fabric, and extracted a small black disc, no larger than a thumbnail. A GPS tracker. Minna's blood ran cold. "He's been tracking us," she whispered. "This whole time, he knew exactly where we were." Marco stared at the device, his expression carved from stone. "No," he said quietly. "Not us. Her." He looked at Hana, at his daughter, at the child Luca had been hunting for 2 years, and something in his eyes went very, very dark. "He put a tracker on my daughter," Marco said. Each word was a blade. "He's been watching her, following her, waiting." He crushed the device in his fist. "And now I'm going to burn everything he's ever built to the ground." The mountain villa revealed itself at dawn. They had driven through the night, Minna and Hana in the armored Maybach, Marco in a separate vehicle with what remained of his security team. The convoy had wound through the darkness, climbing higher and higher into the Taebaek Mountains, leaving Seoul's glittering skyline far behind. Minna had tried to sleep, failed. Hana had no such trouble. She slept with the boneless surrender of childhood, her head in Minna's lap, Bomi clutched against her chest. The rabbit had been carefully stitched closed again, the incision invisible unless you knew where to look. But Minna knew. She would always know. As the first light crept over the peaks, the villa came into view. It was perched on a promontory overlooking a valley shrouded in mist, a structure of dark wood and glass that seemed to grow from the mountainside itself. Traditional Korean architecture merged with modern brutalism, creating something that felt ancient and dangerous at the same time. This was not a vacation home. This was a fortress, a place where final things happened. The convoy pulled through the gates, massive iron structures flanked by stone walls that disappeared into the forest on either side. Security personnel materialized from the tree line, their movements coordinated and silent. Marco's car stopped first. He stepped out, still wearing the bloodied remnants of last night's suit, and surveyed the property with the cold assessment of a general preparing for battle. Minna's door opened. A security officer she didn't recognize extended his hand to help her out. She ignored it, gathering Hana in her arms instead and stepping onto the gravel drive. The air was different here. Thin and cold and sharp, scented with pine and wood smoke. The silence was profound. No traffic, no sirens, no hum of city life. Just the whisper of wind through the trees and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Marco approached them, his expression unreadable. "There's a room prepared for you both in the East Wing. Food, clean clothes, everything you need." He paused, his gaze dropping to Hana's sleeping face. "She should rest. We all should. And then?" Marco's jaw tightened. "And then we end this." Minna slept for 6 hours. When she woke, the sun was high and pale, filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her room. Hana was still asleep beside her, her small chest rising and falling with the rhythm of peaceful dreams. For a moment, Minna just watched her daughter breathe. 5 years of running, 5 years of fear, 5 years of looking over her shoulder, waiting for the bullet she knew was coming. And now they were here, in the eye of the hurricane, waiting for the final storm. She slipped out of bed carefully, padding across the polished wooden floor to the window. The view was breathtaking. Mountains rolling into the distance, their peaks wreathed in clouds, the valley below a tapestry of green and gold. Beautiful, deceptive. A knock at the door made her turn. "Come in." The door opened to reveal the gray-haired woman from Marco's Seoul estate, Mrs. Park, if Minna remembered correctly. She carried a tray with tea and small dishes of food, her expression as neutral and professional as ever. "Mr. Thorne requests your presence in the main hall," she said, setting the tray on a side table. "When you're ready." "And Hana?" "I'll stay with her." For the first time, something softened in the woman's face. "She'll be safe. I give you my word." Minna studied her for a long moment, then nodded. She dressed quickly in the clothes that had been provided. Simple, but expensive, as everything in Marco's world seemed to be. Black trousers, a cream silk blouse, boots with low heels that would allow her to move if she needed to. She had learned that lesson the hard way. The main hall was vast and austere. Wooden beams arched overhead, blackened with age and smoke. The floors were stone, ancient, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. A fire burned in a massive hearth at one end, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Marco stood near the hearth, his back to her, staring into the flames. He had changed out of his bloodied suit into something simpler: black trousers, a charcoal sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was damp, swept back from his face. The cuts on his forehead and arm had been cleaned and bandaged. He looked almost human. Almost. "You wanted to see me?" Minna said. He didn't turn. "Luca will be here within the hour." Minna's blood went cold. "Here? You're bringing him here?" "I invited him." Marco's voice was calm. Too calm. "Told him I'd discovered a traitor in my organization. Asked for his help in dealing with the situation." "And he believed you?" Now Marco turned. The firelight caught his eyes, making them glow like embers. "Luca believes what he wants to believe. It's his greatest weakness." A thin smile crossed his face. "He thinks I'm a fool, Minna. Thinks I've been blind to his scheming for years. He's coming here expecting to find me vulnerable, desperate, ready to be manipulated." He walked toward her, each footstep deliberate on the ancient stone. "What he's going to find instead is the end of everything he's built." "What are you going to do?" Marco stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of cedar and smoke that clung to his skin. "I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves," he said quietly. "But first, I need you to understand something." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a slim leather folder, handed it to her. Minna opened it. Inside were documents, passports, 2 of them with photos of her and Hana, but names she didn't recognize. Bank statements showing accounts in Switzerland and Singapore, the balances large enough to make her head spin. Property deeds for apartments in cities scattered across the globe. "What is this?" "Your exit." Marco's voice was flat, controlled. "After tonight, Luca will no longer be a threat. But my world, the world I live in, will still be dangerous. There will always be enemies, always be threats, always be blood." He stepped back, putting distance between them. "I'm giving you a choice, Minna. You can take those documents and disappear. New names, new lives, enough money to never want for anything. I'll make sure no one ever finds you. Not my enemies, not my allies, not me." His jaw tightened. "Or you can stay." The word hung in the air between them. Stay. Such a simple word. Such an impossible choice. "If I stay?" Minna said slowly. "What happens?" "You become part of my world. Officially. Permanently." Marco's eyes never left hers. "You become my wife. Hana becomes my heir. Everything I have, everything I am, becomes yours to share. And the danger? The danger never ends, but I will spend every moment of every day keeping you safe. Both of you." His voice dropped, roughened. "I have made many mistakes in my life, Minna. I have done terrible things, but I have never broken a promise." He stepped toward her again. "I am promising you now, on my blood, on my name, on everything I hold sacred, that no one will ever hurt you or our daughter again. As long as I draw breath, you will be protected." Minna's heart was pounding. Her mind raced through every logical argument, the danger, the violence, the world of shadows and secrets she would be choosing to enter. But her heart remembered a hotel room in Busan, remembered the way Marco had held her after their first night together. His usual coldness melted away. his voice soft against her ear, remembered the design he had drawn on her wrist with a felt tip marker, laughing at her skepticism. "A phoenix," he had said, "because you're the only person who's ever made me feel like I could rise from the ashes of what I am." She looked down at the documents in her hands, at the escape he was offering, at the freedom she had spent 5 years fighting for. Then she looked at Marco, at the man the world called the Vulture, at the father who had killed 15 men to protect his daughter, at the monster who was offering her everything he had, knowing she might still choose to run. "Show me your wrist," she said. Marco frowned. "What?" "Your wrist, the left one. Show me." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he rolled up the sleeve of his sweater. And there, on the inside of his forearm, rendered in ink that had faded slightly with time but never disappeared, was a red phoenix. The same design he had drawn for her 6 years ago. The same design their daughter wore. "You got it tattooed," Minna whispered, "the week after you died." Marco's voice was rough. "I wanted to carry something of you with me. A reminder of the only person who ever saw something worth saving in what I am." Minna felt something crack open in her chest. Something she had kept locked away for 5 years, buried beneath fear and survival, and the relentless need to protect her daughter. She closed the leather folder, handed it back to him. "I don't need an exit," she said. Marco's eyes widened, just slightly, just enough for her to see the hope flaring behind the carefully maintained control. I've been running for 5 years. I'm tired of running." She stepped toward him, closing the distance between them. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being afraid." She reached up and touched his face, felt the rough stubble beneath her palm, felt the slight tremor that ran through him at the contact. "Our daughter called you Appa last night. She's never had a father before, never had anyone to protect her except me." Minna's voice caught. "But she chose you. Without knowing who you are or what you've done, she looked at you and saw someone safe." Her thumb traced the edge of his jaw. "If a 5-year-old can see it, maybe I should start trusting my own eyes." Marco's hand came up to cover hers. His grip was warm and strong and desperate. "I'm not a good man," he said quietly. "I know. I've done terrible things. I'll do more terrible things before this is over. I know. I can't promise you a normal life. Can't promise you peace or safety or any of the things you deserve." "Marco." Minna stepped closer, rising on her toes until her face was inches from his. "Stop trying to talk me out of this." And she kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss, not a tentative reunion of former lovers. It was fierce and hungry and full of 5 years of grief and fear and longing. Minna poured everything into it. All the nights she had lain awake, wondering if she had made the right choice. All the moments she had seen Hana's eyes and thought of the man who had given them to her. Marco responded in kind, his arms wrapped around her, crushing her against him, his mouth claiming hers with a desperation that stole her breath. He kissed her like she was water, and he had been dying of thirst. Like she was air, and he had been drowning. When they finally pulled apart, both gasping, his forehead rested against hers. "Stay," he breathed. "I'm staying. I'll protect you, both of you. I swear it." "I know." She smiled against his lips. "Now go deal with your brother. We have the rest of our lives to figure out the details." The sound of cars on gravel broke them apart. Marco's expression shifted, the vulnerability sealing itself away, the vulture returning to his perch. He straightened his sweater, rolled down his sleeve, became once again the cold, calculating predator the underworld feared. But when he looked at her, Minna could still see the man beneath the mask. "Wait in the East Wing," he said, "with Hana. Don't come out until I send for you. Marco? Please. The words seemed to cost him something. Let me do this. Let me end it, and then we can start again. Mina nodded. She turned toward the corridor that led to the east wing, then paused, looked back. Marco. He was already moving toward the main entrance, but he stopped, turned. Don't die, she said simply. Something flickered in his expression, almost a smile. I have too much to live for now. And then he was gone. The confrontation happened in the study. Mina wasn't there to witness it. She sat in the room with Hana, reading a story about a princess and a dragon, her ears straining for any sound. Gunshots, shouts, the percussion of violence she had learned to recognize. But the villa remained silent. Later, much later, Marco would tell her what happened. He would tell her how Luca had arrived with 4 men, his expression confident, his smile sharp as a blade, how he had accepted Marco's embrace, clapped him on the shoulder, settled into a leather chair like a king claiming his throne. He would tell her how Luca had begun his performance, concern for Marco's safety, outrage at the attack on the docks, vows to hunt down whoever was responsible. And he would tell her the moment it all fell apart. I know, Marco had said simply. Luca's smile had frozen. Know what? Everything. The ambush 5 years ago. The order to kill Mina. The tracker in my daughter's toy. Marco had leaned forward, his eyes never leaving his brother's face. I know what you are, Luca. I know what you've done, and I know what you were planning to do. The silence that followed was absolute. Luca's men had reached for their weapons, had found themselves staring down the barrels of Marco's security team, who had materialized from the shadows like ghosts. You can't do this, Luca had said, his voice finally cracking. I'm your brother. Blood is blood. Blood is exactly why I'm doing this. Marco had stood, walked to where Luca sat frozen in his chair, leaned down until their faces were inches apart. You tried to kill the mother of my child. You tracked my daughter like an animal. You put a target on her back before she was even old enough to understand why? His voice had dropped to a whisper. Blood is why you're still breathing right now. But don't mistake mercy for weakness. He had straightened, adjusted his cuffs, returned to his position of control. You have 2 choices. Leave now. Leave the country. Leave the organization. Leave everything you've built and never come back, or stay and face the consequences. You'll regret this, Luca had snarled. I'll what? Spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? Marco's smile had been thin and cold. I've been doing that anyway. At least, now I know who the enemy is. He had gestured to his men. Escort my brother to the airport. Make sure he gets on a plane. Make sure he doesn't get off until he's very, very far away. Luca had been dragged from the room, his threats and curses echoing off the ancient stone walls. And Marco had stood alone in the firelight, his head bowed, the weight of 15 years of brotherhood crashing down around him. That was hours ago. Now the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose and amber. Mina stood on the villa's terrace, Hana in her arms, watching the light fade over the peaks. Marco appeared beside her, silent as always, but different somehow. Lighter. It's done, he said. I know. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the sunset. Then Hana stirred. She looked at the horizon, then up at Marco, then at her mother. Are we going home now? She asked. Marco and Mina exchanged a glance. A question passed between them, unspoken, but understood. Yes, Marco said finally. We're going home. Hana frowned. But where's home? Mina smiled and pulled her daughter closer. I don't know yet, baby, but we'll find it together. The Italian coastline was different from anything Mina had ever seen. 3 months had passed since the confrontation at the mountain villa. 3 months of trials and transitions, of Marco dismantling the last remnants of Luca's network, of Minna learning the rhythms of her new life, of Hana slowly, cautiously beginning to trust the man she called Appa. They had left Seoul, left Korea entirely. Marco had properties around the world, but he had let Minna choose where they would go. She had chosen Italy. Why there? He had asked. Because it's where you're from, she had said simply. And I want to know where you come from. So they had come to the Amalfi coast, to a villa perched on a cliff overlooking waters so blue they didn't seem real. Lemon groves tumbled down the hillside. Bougainvillea spilled over ancient stone walls. The air smelled of salt and citrus, and something sweeter, the scent of a life that could finally begin. Now, Minna stood on the terrace, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The sky was a canvas of orange and pink and gold, the sea beneath it glowing like liquid fire. Footsteps behind her, small ones. Mama, look what Appa taught me. Minna turned to see Hana racing toward her, a piece of paper clutched in her hands. Behind her, Marco followed at a more leisurely pace, his expression soft in a way that still surprised Minna every time she saw it. He had changed in the months since they left Seoul. The cold, controlled mask was still there when he needed it. For business calls, for the rare meeting he couldn't avoid. But at home, with them, he was different. He smiled now, laughed, let Hana climb into his lap during movie nights, and drag him through the lemon groves on afternoon adventures. He was becoming the man she had always sensed was hiding beneath the vulture's wings. Hana thrust the paper toward her. Look. Minna looked. It was a drawing, crude and colorful, the work of a 5-year-old's enthusiastic hand. 3 figures stood together on what appeared to be a cliff, with a yellow sun overhead and blue water below. That's you, Hana said, pointing to the figure with long dark hair. And that's Appa, the tallest figure naturally. And that's me. She beamed up at her mother. It's our family. Minna's throat tightened. She knelt down and pulled Hana into a hug, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair. No longer just baby shampoo, but sea salt and sunshine too. It's beautiful, she whispered. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Marco stopped beside them, his hand coming to rest on Minna's shoulder. She's been working on it all afternoon, he said quietly. Wanted to surprise you. Minna looked up at him, at the man she had feared, the man she had fled, the man who had crossed oceans to find her and their daughter, the man who had chosen love over vengeance in the end. Thank you, she said. He frowned slightly. For what? For this. She gestured at the sunset, at Hana, at the villa behind them. For all of this. For giving us a chance to be something other than afraid. Marco was quiet for a moment. Then he knelt beside her, his hand cupping her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. I spent 15 years building an empire, he said softly. Acquiring power, eliminating threats. I thought that was what strength looked like. His eyes met hers, gray as storm clouds, but warm now. Warm in a way she had never seen before. I was wrong. Strength is this. Strength is choosing to stay when you could run. Choosing to trust when you have every reason not to. Choosing to build something worth protecting. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. You taught me that. Both of you. Hana tugged at his sleeve. Appa, the sun is going away. You'll miss it. Marco laughed, a sound that still surprised Minna with its warmth, and stood, lifting Hana onto his hip. We can't miss the sunset, can we? It's the most important part of the day. Why? Hana asked. Because it reminds us that endings can be beautiful too. They stood together on the terrace, father, mother, and child, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The sky blazed with color, then faded to soft purples and blues, then finally to the deep velvet of twilight. Minna leaned into Marco's side, felt his arm wrap around her shoulders, felt, for the first time in 5 years, the absence of fear. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. Marco looked down at her, at their daughter, at the life they were building from the ashes of everything that had come before. "Now," he said, "we live." The last light faded. The stars began to appear, scattered across the sky like diamonds on dark silk. And somewhere in a villa on the Amalfi coast, a family that had been broken found its way back to whole. The Vulture had made his final command, and it was a vow of love. "Before you go, I need something from you. Drop a comment and tell me, Team Marco or Team Run? Did Minna make the right choice? Hit that subscribe button if you're ready for the next chapter. And turn on notifications because in this world, you don't want to be left behind." The Boss's Command, where dark romance becomes obsession. See you in the next one.